Welcome to the Language Fuel podcast. Our mission is to fuel the teaching and learning of languages worldwide. I'm your host, Joanna Smith. Hello and welcome to the Language Fuel podcast, episode number 17. Today we're going to be talking with Rosaria Campbell. Now Rosaria has just taken a new role at ILEP, International Languages and Exchanges and Pathways, and her role is the French advisor, which up until very recently was held by Morgan Patterson, and I think it was episode 4 that we interviewed Morgan. Rosaria is very passionate about a lot of things, and it was fantastic talking with her. I hope you enjoy the interview. And if you enjoy the podcast, please do go ahead and leave a rating or a review on iTunes so that other teachers and learners of languages can enjoy it too. Well, welcome Rosaria. It's lovely to be chatting with you today.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be talking to you too, Joanna.
Now, I wonder if you'd explain a little bit. I know you're working in the role of French advisor in ILEP, which has been Morgan Patterson's job. So could you explain to us a little bit about how that's worked or how that's come about?
Sure. I've been sitting in the French advisor's seat for 2 days now.
Just 2 days?
Yes. But I've been in Auckland for 3 weeks, and Morgan is a very, very capable woman. We're sad to see her go from the French community, but her heart is still with us. And she's now pathway manager at ILEP, where she'll be able to affect change in a greater way across many more schools with management. And she's really focusing around the ALICE project, which looks at implementing teaching of Asian languages in New Zealand schools. But as I say, she's still very much a passionate Francophile, and we're sad to see her go, but I'm very, very happy to follow in her footsteps and carry on the projects she's initiated last year as the French advisor.
Perfect. Well, welcome to the role. 2 days in, it's still new, although as you say, you've been on the ground for a few weeks here, just getting to know the ropes and things. So you're obviously a French teacher and a French speaker because you're in this role as French advisor, but you and I talked recently and you mentioned you've got French, German and Maori as both language learning and teaching experiences. Could you just tell us a little bit about your language learning experiences?
Sure.
And I guess how did it come about that you've learned these 3 different languages?
Well, I am, as you say, a passionate language learning advocate. My passion does really lie in the teaching and learning of French. And learning languages has opened many doors for me. So when I was 13, I started my language learning journey and I learnt German and French at school. And I really wanted to learn our own language, Maori, because it meant so much to me as a Kiwi. And I've embraced that as part of who I am, even as a Pākehā growing up in New Zealand.
So how did you learn Maori? Was it also as a subject at school, or was it extracurricular?
It was offered as a compulsory part of our curriculum at school, but I went to Kapahaka as a secondary student and took part every week in that. And then later on at university, I continued this and learnt Māori as a minor as part of my Bachelor of Arts at Canterbury. And I just found it really, really enriching in so many ways. And I take real pride in speaking Māori when I can here and overseas. And it's the first thing that foreigners want to know is, can you do the haka and can you introduce yourself in Māori? And that's something that I find a taonga for me, and I'm happy to share it. So I think it's really important, and we did deliver that. I taught it in Napier as well, and it was actually a core module to every language that we taught in our department at my previous school. And I think that's really important.
So you mean if somebody was learning, say, French or German as a subject, they would, as part of that, they'd have to learn Maori being the New Zealand national language. Wow.
So the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks of our year teaching the language, an international language, we made a real effort to deliver most of our teaching in Māori in those first few weeks.
That's amazing. I'm quite impressed with the leadership, whoever's decided that that's one way to go. Are you aware whether that's also in place in any other schools in New Zealand?
I think It is. It's recognised as a really important part of our bicultural heritage,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one way of implementing it in the program. And I
Mm.
think there's a really rich connection between Maori and French culture, and I've seen that in Akaroa in Banks Peninsula in the South Island, and students are quite intrigued to learn that the word for France or French in Maori is wiwi. So I think
It's lovely.
there's a fantastic connection that can be made, and it's really, really powerful when you draw on both cultures like that. So.
Yeah, fantastic. So just going back a little bit to your language learning experiences, you mentioned you ended up having Maori as a minor at university. Did you
Yes,
carry on with French and German to university level, and have you travelled to those places or had immersion experiences there as well?
I have, and I learnt French and German all through school. I then was fortunate to be granted 2 scholarships from the Alliance Française while I was at school, which enabled me to travel to New Caledonia and then to Paris after I finished school. And I had
Great.
a month's tuition at the Alliance Française in Paris, which was a fabulous experience. What it
Yes.
wasn't without its challenges, that's for sure. The middle of
Yeah.
winter in Paris, and
Yep.
my luggage was delayed and everything else. But then I went to Brittany for 6 months after that and lived there as a student at a school.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually did my studies in the baccalaureate, so that was it was an eye-opening experience into the French education system, and
Yes.
I could make some interesting comparisons between what I had studied here and what I was studying over there.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I imagine that those months, living and breathing in the language would have absolutely cemented your language, in your own
Definitely.
mind. Yeah.
And I learnt too that you think language will allow you to access a country quite easily, but you do need to have a good grasp of the culture as well. And
Mm.
language and culture are inextricably linked, so you need to understand that they both go hand in hand. And that
Yeah.
enables you to have a more satisfying life in an overseas country and integrate fully into the community as well. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree with that. So that's some great insight into your language learning experiences. Tell us then about your decision to become a language teacher. Was it just absolutely what you wanted to do, or, how did you get into it, and what did you end up teaching?
I've been very fortunate to have had received many opportunities through learning a language. As I said, one of them was going to France to a war commemoration with Sir Jerry Matapare, and that was a fantastic experience. And I felt quite indebted to the French teaching community. I had a fantastic teacher myself, Mrs. Jenny Field, at school, and she inspired me to become a teacher. And I felt an obligation to return that favour in some way, some small way, to the French learning community.
Hmm.
And I also enjoy working with younger people, and
Yeah.
teaching seemed to be a good fit for me. And I do genuinely get a real sense of satisfaction from passing on this passion to students. And so I was fortunate to get a job at Timaru Girls High and then Napier Girls High, teaching languages, and loved every minute of it.
Mm. So did you teach mostly French, or was it you teach Maori as well?
I initially taught German and Maori and then French at Napier Girls High.
Right.
And Maori was really the key to unlocking those doors as well. So
Mm.
I fully endorse learning any language, and I do think it's really important to know our own language as well. Yeah,
Yeah, fantastic. Our own, as in our country's unique, special
exactly.
treasure. Yeah.
And there's nowhere else where Māori's spoken or, outside of New Zealand, except for
Mm.
obviously people who take it abroad, but it's unique to us and we need to treasure it.
Yeah, it's a little bit like people who, a lot of the times people can go and travel to another country, but they may not have really explored their own. So
Exactly, yeah.
to explore our own linguistic heritage
Yeah,
is a wonderful thing to do, but before or at the same time as, learning other languages. That's
definitely.
wonderful.
And
So,
learning another language helps you understand your own as well. So it's
yes.
and another culture, actually you find out who you really are when you're
Hmm.
experiencing that, and you develop another identity, and that's a critical part to language teaching, is fostering that identity in a student. And when they walk through your doors, they become a different person, and that's quite special because that stays with them, and they can foster that lifelong learning in that capacity as well.
Mm. Do you think it builds empathy in terms of, you mentioned culture quite a lot. If you understand that people have a really different worldview, you don't get so upset, or, you can sort of approach that in a different way. Is that your experience?
Definitely, and I think you realise that there's people bring different strengths in their own cultures, and you can work with those strengths when you understand them. And you can negotiate between misunderstandings better when you have a toolkit and those strategies on board. I think it really enables you to develop that emotional intelligence and intercultural capabilities. So I think there's so much unspoken skill that's required in learning a language effectively.
Wonderful. I can hear your passion coming out. It's great. And so how are you using the language today? I mean, you're involved, you have been up until very recently in a classroom yourself teaching. Are you involved in communities that speak these languages or to keep them up to date?
I'm still learning, and I'm always going to be still learning. So obviously my new role, I write in French, I email in French, I speak in French every day, and I look for opportunities to use the language where I can, even outside of work. I believe in being part of the community, so I'm a member of the local Alliance Française, and I also am learning through Te Wairanga or Aotearoa, so I'm constantly trying to upskill where I can. And I was even looking at studying some Mandarin on the side, but that might have to wait.
There's only so much one can handle as well as a full-time job. And,
exactly. But I think French, for me, French is part of who I am. And even on the weekend, I was at the Buskers Festival watching some Quebec circus performers, and that was fabulous to see French being used in the wider community. And there's a French frigate in town as well, which I'm hoping to visit. And there's just so much out there. Once you discover one French person, it can lead you on to so many more interesting opportunities. So I'm trying to actively learn the language and upskill in as many ways as I can.
Fantastic. That's very inspiring. When we talked the other day a little bit, you mentioned that one of the things you're quite passionate about is technology. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, and technology in terms of in the language classroom or in general?
It's a really exciting area, and I hope, my goal is to lead change in implementing technology into the language classroom in New Zealand. I think learning a language requires you to definitely have a component of personal interaction, and that can't necessarily be replaced by technology. There's still a really important part in communicating in a real sense, but I think that technology it can cater for the deficits in our teaching, and we can't be there at our students being called 24/7. So I think there is a huge role that technology can help us with, and I think it also can, through being disruptive, it can also help equity, and it can be a hugely helpful democratizing force, which means it can open up the fourth wall to students who may never have had the chance to travel. They can suddenly explore Paris in Google Street View, for example. And that's really, really exciting for me. I believe in equity in our classroom, in a languages classroom, and I think technology can not only help the teacher, but also afford new opportunities to the students. So that's, I think, a hugely exciting component of technology.
And do you, in terms of, I guess, you've only just started your role as French advisor, but just from your experience and networking as a teacher, how widespread is the use of technology in language learning classrooms? Are you seeing some people at one end of the spectrum and other classrooms at the other end of the spectrum?
Yes, I think it's fair to say there is quite a wide spectrum out there, and it's important to have a shared vision around why technology can help us and how it can help us. I think that's where the future is headed, and you only need to look at the draft document of what New Zealand education will look like in 2025 to see that technology is going to play a huge role in that, and we need to embrace it and see it for its positive use and positive consequences. And I think it needs to happen sooner rather than later. There's urgency in embracing it and utilising it to its full extent.
Yeah.
And I think assessments are going to be largely based around technology and as well, so we need to get on board with that too.
So will you be aiming to foster the use of technology in different classrooms as part of your role at ILEP? Is that one of your sort of big projects or visions, I guess?
That's one of my projects, exactly. And collaboration around technology. I mean, Google Docs, for example, are a fantastic tool for collaborating with students, with other teachers around the country, with French speakers worldwide. and you can just do it with a click of the mouse. It's brilliant, and that's why I'm passionate about delivering this and implementing this collaborative and digital practice in our language classroom in New Zealand.
Lovely. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the language teachers in New Zealand, whether it's the French or German or Maori or the other languages that are being taught here?
Sure. One thing I'd like to suggest would be bringing in speakers from our own French-speaking community into the classroom, whether it be via Skype or in real person. I think it's something we need to do more of, and there's so many French people out there, or people with connections to France, who can inspire our students. Obviously, the teacher plays an integral part in that, and there are fantastic French teachers in New Zealand. We've got a wonderful community, but I think in particular with innovative French companies in New Zealand, there are really interesting connections to be made on a business level as well. And if students can see the relevance of learning French in order to help them in their career pathway, then that's a wonderful thing to have. I can list at least 20 different companies that are operating in New Zealand with French connections, and they are companies that are really important for us. Sofitel, for example, there's a driverless shuttle in the Christchurch airport, which has funding from a French sponsor, and there's so many other companies out there that have that connection to France. And that's one way that French can be useful for us and for our students in their careers, which is really exciting, I think.
So bringing in speakers, obviously collaboration was your other big point earlier, and making the use of technology. And what about the role of ILEP? Would you encourage more of that? I'm assuming you would.
Definitely. So we offer so many really valuable programs to our teachers, and I would urge teachers to get on board with these. One, for example, is a 3-week stage in New Caledonia for French teachers. And there's so many interesting intercultural experiences. There's language tuition at university, and there's pedagogy support contained within these 3 weeks. And it's all paid for by ILEP and Uni Services, and the Embassy of France in Wellington, which is fantastic for teachers of French. We also have ongoing support, which is an inquiry program, an introduction and consolidation. So there's programs for everyone at any stage that are being offered, and I'd urge teachers to get on board this year because we don't know what will happen with the change of government, for example. And language teachers have so many advantages in professional development that other teachers don't have. So we are in a really fortunate position, and it's my job to reach out to teachers to help them get on board with these workshops and conferences and just even visits at schools from time to time. So I'm only an email away.
Fantastic. And for the listeners, could you tell them what your email address is?
It's french@ilep.ac.nz.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Well, I am very inspired by your passion, and I think you're going to do a fantastic job. And I know Morgan is still around in the community there at ILEP, but
exactly.
You've got a very wonderful passion to carry you through and a vision to see through. So it's going to be exciting to see how you go over the next wee while.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to you. And I'd also like to share this on our blog, which is frenchilep.blogspot.co.nz as well. So
Great.
That's where we list how we teach French in New Zealand and any other exciting events as they come to hand. So.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was great chatting.
Lovely to talk. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Language Fuel podcast. You can navigate to the show notes and links via our homepage at www.languagefuel.com. See you next time.